Welcome back to the Paranormal Girl podcast. I am your host, Kristen. Today we pick up the conversation with Jim Brown right where we left off, talking about video captures of Sasquatch. I ask him about what he looks for in the footage to validate or debunk before we jump into signs and evidence that we might find out in the woods. Support for the Paranormal Girl podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. 2024 is here in full swing, and that means it's time for another New Year's resolution check-in with our friends at Manscaped. It's never too late for the man in your life to level up his grooming game. Manscaped's new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. Whether he's going for a trim or that clean-shaven look, this trimmer has him covered. Trusted by over 10 million men worldwide, now is his time to get a grip on his grooming with my exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code PNG for 20% off, plus free shipping. The ball has dropped, but don't let him drop the ball on his balls. Resolutions might come and go, but a well-groomed man is here to stay, ladies. Thanks to Manscaped. And thanks to you. Sometimes a fella may not realize he's looking a little like man Squatch down there. Okay? This is the time to lend a helping hand. Introduce him to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, and you have just introduced him to his new grooming sidekick. He can take it in the shower with him. He's got his choice of trim with the interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. He can get into nooks and crannies he never knew existed with its dual LED spotlight. Banish the man Squatch and get 20% off and free shipping with the code PNG at manscaped.com. All right, let's jump back in. Please enjoy the second half of my conversation with Jim Brown.
I think the Freeman film is a good one. It's the same kind of thing. He had seen footprints and comes back the next day looking, and he finds some really fresh ones. And he hears something, and you can hear it coming through the woods, and then he sees it, and it seems to maybe go pick up a baby. That seems to happen a lot of times. I can think of 3 instances. Uh, but he sees it going through the woods, and it's not bad. There's the Memorial Day footage, which is where people videoed this large creature running down a hillside there in Oregon or Washington, one of the Northwest states. And they tried recreating that, like with a trail runner, and couldn't do it, as I have read. And it seems to stop and pick up a baby behind a rock and then run off into the woods. So I'm thinking, it's like, okay, here's mom. She's weighing whether to get seen or make sure the baby's taken care of. And she decides that, she'll risk exposure, but to keep the baby safe. It's sort of the way I see it. There's also one, ironically, the 4th of July footage where you see this something come from behind a rock, and again it seems to pick up a baby and then walk off. There's none of them that are perfect. But what you do see seems to jive with the Patterson-Gimlin footage. And there's some others I've seen lately. I don't know whether to trust them or not. But look good. But I can't put a name to them or anything. A lot of those you can go to M.K. Davis and Thinker Thunker, who are guys who analyze these films and say, yeah, or yeah, that looks, I can't prove it fake. And they're worth going to, and they've got a lot of them.
Yeah. I would also throw in there just for my listeners, check out Sasquatch Syndicate. They do a little theater, like 5 to 10 minute, video review every week that's excellent, and
Oh,
they'll rate it
cool.
too. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Throw
Okay.
that in there since we're talking about it. Well, how, if we are to properly be skeptical of these videos and decide for ourselves, like, okay, this is compelling enough. I think this is just as legit, if not more, of course, of the PGF. Like, how should we be looking for certain things in the video? Do you look for certain things when you're looking at the videos?
Yeah, and I actually almost got taken in by one not long ago that was here in Colorado, actually, video that was taken from the train.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
my first thought was that looks pretty good, but then I started
Mhm,
looking at it, and it had long arms, but the hands were floppy. They seemed to be floppy, and
hmm,
when it sits down, it's set just like a person,
yeah.
rather than something whose legs were entirely different construction. Um, and then as it turns out, then the guy who did it, who I've seen before at some of the conferences, he says I did it. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so, but I tend to look for proportions. Um, long arms, shorter legs. Knees bent if you can see that. Um, the just the movement. Does it look too much like a person, or is it? I mean, these things are huge. They're
Mhm.
big, they're bulky, but they're incredibly fast and agile. Um, the I kind of look at the settings sometimes. There's a great film of one wading. Somebody sees it wading through a swamp.
Mhm.
Now I'm thinking, okay, are you going to go wading through a swamp wearing big old fake feet and a helmet where you can't see, where you've got alligators and cottonmouths? You know, are you going to even risk doing that in the first place?
Mhm.
Um, you know, and if it's or if something is trippingly through the woods, it's probably not a person because you just can't run. And those big old fake feet and a helmet, you couldn't run through rough terrain anything more than a sidewalk, and probably not even that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never tried putting on a gorilla suit and running down a sidewalk, and you know, God willing, I never will. But the if they're running very agile, if they're very agile, they're in the woods. That's a good sign,
Mhm.
um, because sometimes even at the best of times, just rocks and stuff in the ground and in the mountains and stuff, it makes for slow walking. So those are some of the things I look for: the terrain. Um, does it move like a person or like something else? Does it, and the proportions are always, those are the things I look for.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then there's just, there seems to be a thing, and I don't know if I'd call this definitive, but you see it a lot where they seem to walk and they move from like touching one tree to the next to the next. I've seen that in a lot of videos. Um, and I can't explain it unless there's just something about the groundedness of it. I don't know. But like, when you get up in the middle of the night and you're staggering, you're kind of walking and you're touching the door, um, maybe you're not old enough to be for that to be the case,
Oh,
but
I'm old enough.
but sometimes you see that, and uh, to me that just adds a little thing of little touch of authenticity to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, So those are a few thoughts on that. I'm sure I'll
Okay.
have more eventually, but
Yeah, yeah. No, guys, I am very wary when I'm approaching video evidence because I know that it's a very easy piece of evidence to hoax, and
mm,
especially something in, with a forum like video or photo evidence, like
Mm,
that kind of stuff. All you need is a good program, man, and a
mm,
little imagination, and it can be very easy to hoax. So I do get very wary with that kind of stuff, but I appreciate you providing the things that you look for, just to like keep that in mind as I
mm.
proceed through this season on the
Uh,
subject. And
and
don't get
people al
taken in.
and people always wanna say CGI, CGI.
Yeah.
Now, that's getting easier, I guess,
Mhm.
but it's still not easy to do. It takes a studio,
Mhm.
or somebody, with a lot of knowledge and a lot of stuff to actually create CGI.
Yeah.
Like I said, maybe getting easier with, as time goes on, but historically, back when a lot of these were filmed, um, that just, you'd have to go to, Disney Studios to do something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and in the instance of like the Freeman footage, even then, like it was, I think they were able to come out and say like this, everything that is on this film, this happened in camera, like it shot what
Hmm.
it shot, like there was
Hmm.
no after effects, nothing like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that one too, like I find very intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just went to a conference and heard his son, speak on it, and it
Oh,
was,
cool.
yeah, yeah, it was just really, really interesting. Well, thank you for all of that. Let's shift gears here because I do wanna give a little bit of time to talk specifically about Bigfoot evidence.
Hmm.
Um, let's start out, like, what kind of evidence would you generally like to see in a reportedly
Hmm.
Sasquatch area or generally initially look for?
Well, there would be the gold standard would be if somebody came across a corpse.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That would be, God willing, they would not create that corpse. I just think, that would be murder.
yeah.
Um, but the if you can, footprints are always, very good, and there's hundreds of them. There are hundreds of footprints out there that have been cast, and some of them actually even show like a deformity, like maybe the foot was caught in a trap or something. It's called the cripple footprint.
Mhm.
And one, I think might have been Belgium, but somebody took that to a convention of podiatrists and said, "What do you think of this?" And they just said, "This is a real injury. I can see the real injury here."
Mhm.
Um, and what was it? Cliff Barotman, I think he said the most interesting thing. He said, what is a footprint? I said, well, it's not just an impression in the ground. It's a record of the interaction between the foot and the ground and the subsurface. Every footprint is going to be different because at any given moment you're shifting your weight, the ground is shifting. Every footprint is going to be different a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean the best evidence are footprints and handprints, and I'll include in handprints. I'll include fingerprints.
Mhm.
If you go to the SIR website, there is a picture there of a huge muddy handprint on the side of a truck, um, that even has dermal ridges and everything in it.
Wow, wow.
Some of the footprints you can see dermal ridges in there.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just not fakeable. I mean, I guess theoretically you could, but when you have a succession of things, footprints, some with dermal ridges, some not, because the ground is different with every step. But
Sure.
when it can tell a story, that's what I'm trying to say. When those
Mhm.
footprints can tell a story, um, that is probably, I mean, the best. But you know, as Cliff Brockman also said, what is somebody asked him what the best evidence he had ever seen was, and he said the similarity of evidence all the way across the world, from California to Ohio to Kentucky to China. Um, and where he was there, and they said, "Oh, you have these in America too," um, you know, and you're seeing the same sorts of things all the way across the world.
Yeah.
Um, people who couldn't possibly have any contact with each other. A remote village in China, and the West Coast, or Ohio. A lot of them, I guess, are seen in Ohio. Um, but so, I mean, those things are fabulous evidence. The hair samples seem to be very contentious. They People, they get hair samples, and
Hmm.
they come back and says, well, it was we couldn't you couldn't talk we couldn't tell, it was
Right.
contaminated, it had some
Right.
human DNA in there. um a quick aside, one of the people I go out with a lot, his name is Scott Barta, and he's written a book called In the Dark Pine. And he is a lifelong friend of Michael, who started SIR, when they literally grew up on the same block together as kids, and they've had all kinds of adventures together. And Scott goes into a good bit of detail in the book about what has happened to some of the DNA stuff they've sent off for testing.
Ooh.
Um, Not huge and not technical, but
Hmm.
just kind of what's happened, some of the story behind that.
Hmm.
And they've had some really spooky stuff. Again, after reading his book, I almost didn't go out in the woods again. Like, nah, too much stuff out there.
Well,
um,
I'm gonna have to grab the book because one of the parts of the whole like bulk of evidence that we could possibly get, that is my favorite. It is the most intriguing to me is that like the actual physical stuff that they could possibly leave behind, just like an animal would.
mhm,
So like the scat, the blood,
mhm.
the hair samples, that kind of stuff really just like sends me. And so yeah, so I'll have to get it just for that section, but it does sound like a good book
And,
anyway.
and as I recall, I think Michael had a freezer full of scat, which unfortunately there was a power outage, and
Oh,
I
no.
guess a lot of this was lost. So I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I would not want to clean out the freezer. I'm just sorry. Yeah, you're a good
that
friend,
would
but you're
be
not that good a friend.
oh,
Um,
that would be a hired help day.
yes. Um, but yes, that is fascinating stuff,
Yeah,
and they
well, have you
always seem to come back contaminated.
right, right, okay, okay. Because I was gonna ask if you knew of any other circumstances or just, like, stories that you have heard where it came back, I mean, maybe inconclusive or just some
Mhm.
kinda just weird, like, result, just strange result.
I believe some of them have come back inconclusive,
Yeah, mhm,
and that's a harder one. Well, it's harder, but I don't know as much about that.
mhm.
Um, the Wish I could remember. There was one guy at the conference in Hastings, first time I went, who gave a very, very good lecture on the DNA, and the DNA as it seems to vary across the country, as if basically charting its movements across the world or something like that.
Hmm.
And sadly, he gave it right after lunch, and it was very technical, and everybody was kind of falling asleep. And I,
No.
I hate to say I kind of dozed through a good portion of it, but but it was very good, and the guy deserved a lot more credit, I think, than he got. Yeah, he wasn't flashy, but he was just good, solid scientific evidence.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess you could probably go back and find the guest list for the would have been the second Bigfoot conference in Hastings, Nebraska,
Yeah.
and look at the guest list, and you know maybe figure out who that was, because they had Cliff Barackman and
Uh-huh.
and some others. Um, and one of the interesting things, just Cliff was talking about, of course, he was on Finding Bigfoot, uh,
Mhm.
and he talks about the fact that the show was kind of sensationalized, but that they were serious about what they were doing.
Right.
And when they found that the producers were kind of manipulating stuff to make it look like this, said they went on strike and they weren't going to do it until they
Yeah.
fixed it. And he
Mhm.
said all these suits came out from New York and everything. And he said, well, we thought this is what you wanted. And they said, no, we are serious about this. Um, so my respect for them went up hugely when I heard the
Yeah.
story. You know?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, he's one of the good ones, I gotta
Hmm.
say. If you ever get a chance, if you're ever out at, in the Pacific Northwest, take a gander at his museum. He's got it's the North
I've,
American Bigfoot Center. Have you been?
I've heard
Oh,
stories of it.
okay,
I
okay.
would love to
Oh.
see that. Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, it's such it was just really cool. Really glad
Hmm.
we made it. Um, well, okay. What is your opinion on kind of like interactive evidence such as rock throwing and wood knocking and like gifting, that kind of stuff where we're actually doing this kind of thing?
Well, it seems to happen a lot.
Mhm.
Um, Again, Scott and Michael, tell of of sitting at a table like a card table, and at their campsite, and a rock comes flying over the canyon a couple of 100 feet away, big rock, and it just, if I remember right, it landed right square on the table.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, if you could sign them up for baseball, I think they would just be amazing from what I hear. They'll hit you if they want to hit you. Um, there's somebody here, I think it was up in just in the foothills here hiking, and they, something threw a rock at them. They threw a rock back, and this thing comes, and then a big one comes whizzing right by their head.
Ooh.
And they decided that little game, they didn't win that little game, and they just got out of there. Um, there's so many stories of
Mhm.
the rock throwing, um, that, I mean, something is throwing rocks, or there's a lot of people who have no interest in this or knowledge of it who are lying.
Yeah.
Um, the Some of the other interactions, whooping. Um, I don't know that really. I can't say that it does much. It hasn't in my experience. Other people have had better experiences, but I know, like, one person used to put on some of the um, Sierra sounds, put them on his car, stereo, and play them as loud as he could, hoping to attract something. But I'm saying, I don't know if you want to do that. You don't know what you might be asking them to do. You
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
asking them to perform a very unnatural act or something, and you know, uh, you want to be careful what you're saying. Or, but I know other people have had them standing outside the tent, and something is talking to them.
Mhm.
This is what they call it, the samurai chatter, because it seems to sound very Japanese.
Hmm.
And it's been analyzed by Scott Nelson, and two other people have looked at it. But Scott Nelson was a linguist in the Navy, as I recall, who has said it's language. It is absolutely
Right.
language. And others, uh, Kristen something, I could look that up, but and she says this is not manipulated. And
Mhm.
other people have listened to these recordings, um, of this samurai chatter, of this vocalization, and it seems to be very, very real. And
Right.
like I said earlier about Moorhead, you you hear this, and it's kind of scary. you know.
Mhm.
Um, what other wood knocks I've heard, and I suspect it's just a way of um, letting somebody know who's where. Here's I'm here. Where are you? Or I don't know. It could be. I think they probably, if they know that they're there, like if you get to camp and are doing whoops and stuff, and
Mhm.
you see you setting up camera traps and stuff, they probably will set up. They probably have a sentinel. Would be my guess. Um,
Ooh. Hmm.
and so it's like, okay, they're awake.
Mhm.
I mean, who knows what they're trying to say? I mean, that's what I say. We know almost nothing about them. We surmise a lot. We know that they seem to smell bad, oftentimes, not always. They smell really bad. We know that they are big, that they're strong. Um, and for the most part, they seem not only neutral, but sometimes even quite benevolent. Um, People have told of you wake up in the morning and finding all their firewood stacked under the tarp. Uh, Either
Oh,
that or
that would be nice.
yeah, I mean, maybe it's elves or fairies, and not Bigfoot. Who knows? But I've heard stories of them being very benevolent,
Yeah.
um, and curious. They seem to be very curious. They seem to have a sense of humor.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that Michael has experienced and others is to have them come running through the camp when it's pitch black, um, and even bumping into people, and they just seem to have a sense of humor and really like to mess with your head.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
so I think they could be really fun if they didn't tear you apart like the sheep that I mentioned earlier.
Ooh, very well, but very interactive. That's interesting. Well, so Jim, I'm just gonna ask you one more question that I had in regards to evidence,
Hmm.
and then, we're gonna move into our final segment here, but I wanted to ask you this, because, you've studied the evidence for quite a bit longer than I have, and I have been grappling with this concept of like this non-connected evidence, like it's more so assumed that it's being caused by Bigfoot,
Hmm. Hmm.
like tree structures or
Hmm.
breakage or like even like the nests. Yeah,
Hmm.
like as fascinating as those are, I do find them very fascinating. Like, have we actually seen them making all of this stuff, doing this stuff? Like, why can we is it safe to assume that they are doing it? They are the cause.
Um, to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever actually seen them doing this.
Mhm,
Um, it seems to be you seem to see it in areas associated with areas where there are reports of people having seen them
mhm,
or having seen something more substantial like a footprint. Um, you may see a footprint, and then in the same area, you may find some tree structures or something like that. And like I said, what I said a minute ago when I was saying we really don't know much of anything.
yeah.
Um, that is all surmising on our part, surmising, making up words here. I believe Dr. Meldrum does not believe that tree structures are relevant.
Mm,
Uh,
mhm,
I just heard somebody say that. I have not heard him say that, but he was out here visiting once, and somebody mentioned that. Um, the um, Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. And a lot of it is disconnected,
mhm,
and we may find. I mean, we may find someday that they don't exist. That there is something else doing this. We don't know what. We don't know what it is. Something is doing something, but it may not be a Bigfoot as we are thinking of it. Who knows? We just don't know. Um, the I think the trick is to not be cynical. Um, be skeptical but not cynical.
mhm,
Um, cynicism is not wisdom, and cynicism is a reflex, knee-jerk reaction to help you preserve your worldview. Um, it doesn't leave any room for expanding your worldview. Skepticism does. You could ask, why don't we find bodies? That's a very good question. I have my thoughts about that, but to say we've never found a body, therefore, you know, they don't exist.
right.
That's a cynical approach. Um, and you just say, well, they can't exist because there's no evidence because we've discounted all the evidence. Because, like I've said, there's historical precedent. The fact that every Native American tribe has a name for it, not as an archetype or something, but as a real creature in the forest. Um, the historical precedents. There's just thousands and thousands of people who have seen something. Um, it just goes on and on. There's the audio recordings. There's the footprints and handprints. All of this stuff. That's if not technically evidence, it's a clue.
Mhm.
And what I've tried to do is I'm not trying to prove that this guy exists. I'm saying by everything I wrote and I've tried to say is let's keep an open mind that it could.
Right.
Um, I don't think it's gonna be hard to get proof, especially nowadays, because nowadays with artificial intelligence and stuff, it's getting harder and harder to create something or film something and have people say it's not true, that it's real. I mean,
Right.
um,
Right.
so I don't know if I just sort of went off on a tangent there. I forget what your actual question was.
No, no, no. I mean, I think we roundabout got to it. I was just asking about like the disconnected
Yeah.
evidence and just like how do we know they're the cause of it? But you
Mhm.
answered that. Yeah, yeah. Like that was very good, and then some.
Mhm.
I I appreciate it.
Hey, as long as I get to talk, that's all that matters.
Well,
Hear my head roar.
yeah. No, I'm glad that you touched upon the, skepticism versus cynicism. It's something I've said on this very show as well.
Hmm.
And yeah, you said it in a really good way there, like, skepticism is a way to continue preserving your worldview, and
Yeah. Mhm.
that's true. That's just true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be a little bit more open-minded than that. All right, sir. Well, we are near the end. We are at our final segment. I got a couple questions for you, and then we will send
Okay.
people somewhere online and close it out. So final questions, final thoughts.
Mhm.
First question for you, and I'm so glad you said this. You said a sentinel for Bigfoot. I heard
Mhm.
some crazy information recently, and I haven't heard anybody else mention it before. So kind of just like, came out of nowhere. But are you aware or have you heard of a connection between Bigfoot and owls?
Mm. Um, I am aware of there being something there. Um, the Actually, I know more about owls and UFOs
I've
than
heard
than
that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
As the cover. So who's to say they're not one and the same?
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
that's this is what I was getting from Jacques Vallée was all of these phenomena may well be different views of different parts of the same thing.
mhm,
Um, I have heard people talk about that, but I don't really have any thoughts to speak of on that. I
mm.
wish I did because it's a boy that just reeks of archetypes and
It
mythology and
does.
stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it really does, that's kinda something I spoke to also was that, like, the owl as an archetype in Native American,
Hmm.
his their story, history, and also across the paranormal, like, world in general, like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it comes up quite a bit,
Yeah,
but was just curious
yeah,
to
yeah.
ask somebody in the field. Um Second question, what would you like to see more of in the Sasquatch field moving forward?
Hmm. I would like to see um, done in a respectful way, but coming in and bringing science and um, I won't say kindness is not quite the right word, but
Mhm,
um, empathy kind of together. Um, I keep using parabolic mics and um, FLIRs and all these different things, but you'd have to sneak it in there because they very likely are watching you set this stuff up. Um, One guy set up, I was reading about, who set up this elaborate trap, and everything went away until he took it down, and they all started coming back again. But I would like to see, um, bringing in, basically bringing all the guns to bear. I'd like to see that at least a few times to see what happens. You might
Okay.
scare them off, or you might actually get something. But if, let's say they did, let's say they got, FLIR cameras and everything else, there's absolutely, we see it, take a video of it by the stream, pulling mussels out of the water and eating mussels, everything. And it's like, so then what? If you tell the world this thing is really out there, everybody and their cousin is going to be out there hounding it to death, and everybody's going to try to shoot one.
Mhm.
Um, what's I heard a quote one time. Well, shoot it before it hurts somebody. Well, it's been out there for decades. But
Mhm.
so if it were proven true, I don't know that I would really like to see it come out. Um, if I were ever able to catch a perfect photograph, my thinking is I would have a little thing at my coffee shop one night, bring in all my friends, especially the cynical friends, and say,
Mhm.
"Here, there you go," and then hide it away and never show it again. Um, because I really, I don't know, I've developed a real fondness for these things, and I would hate to see their lives destroyed. And I
Mhm.
even feel kind of guilty sometimes going out there thinking, they're going, "Oh God, here's another guy out there." God, now we have to go the long way around to get to the water source because we got these guys here. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, so I don't, that's really what I'd like to see is really
Yeah.
not a lot of anything except people going out there saying, I am in your backyard. I would love to meet you. And if you would let me meet you, that would be awesome. you know?
Yeah, yeah, maybe, I don't know. More open-mindedness. You jogged my memory on something. Oh, when you were talking about, like, the shooting thing too. What I personally would like to see moving forward in the Sasquatch
Uh-huh.
field is another option to the shoot or not to shoot
Hmm.
dilemma. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I was this one guy I mentioned who was the Vietnam vet, who was, a tough man,
Mhm.
an absolute man's man. And like I say, the stories he tells, I have so much respect for him. But we were out one time and there was a logging crew, and they're out there for weeks at a time. So we stopped, and he just goes up and says, "How you guys doing?" and everything. He said, "Did you ever see anything strange around here?" And well, like what? I don't know, just something unusual. You mean like the Yeti over there in the river? And, and it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So we talked about it a little bit. He says, "Well, what was your first thought?" He says, "Well, I wished I had my gun. I wanted to shoot it."
Ah.
And he says, "You probably don't want to do that." They're oftentimes they move in family groups, and they would hate you for it. And they might not ever find the pieces of your body, if you did. And he's going, "Well, okay." And
Yeah.
obviously, that's what you were hunting for when you said, "Have you seen anything strange?" Um, I
Well.
mentioned earlier that I would come back to the Air Force Academy. I mentioned something earlier about the Air Force Academy.
Oh,
I think I did earlier on.
did you wanna
Um,
talk about that for the
just
Patreon after, or you wanna just talk about it now?
oh wait, we can do it for the Patreon. That's
Does
that's
that sound
fine.
good? Yeah,
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 yeah.
let's save it for the
Little.
Patreon. A little
Okay, yeah.
little something special for my patrons. Um, alright, yes, because I do wanna hear that story. I wanna hear that. Final question for you today,
Yes.
though. If you could have been first on the scene at any one discovery in history, which one and why?
Ooh. Um. Boy, I have a thing for physicists. I love physicists and physics.
Mhm,
I would have loved, I think, to have been around. What's the story of this is so obscure. This is so nerdy. So just forgive me. Um, what was his name? He was Indian fellow. He was Rafsanjani, if I remember the name right. He sent a letter to Einstein, and because basically he had read everything in his library in his town, all the mathematics book. And he said, dear sir, I think I have found the answer to this one particular problem. And Einstein gets it, and he said, throws it in the trash. But then he pulls it out and realizes this guy is an absolute genius. And I think it would have been so awesome to be there to see Einstein being taken aback by somebody else's work, and to see him, go, oh my gosh, this is, or my God. I just, like I say, that's nerdy beyond belief. But I think that would have been a really, really thrilling moment.
That's awesome. That was so unexpected. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you. That
Well, I
was
mean,
awesome.
I also want to go to Antarctica, but
Well,
what,
like we were
so what,
saying, time doesn't exist. Nothing is real. You can. You can.
what would be your one if you had a choice? What would be play one you would like to see?
Oh gosh, I would have liked to have been there to see what really happened for the Roswell crash.
Oh
Just
God, yeah.
standing on the ranch field and just watching. What did something actually happen? What crashed? I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
And
oh yeah.
discover that, just be first on the scene and see
That
that.
that's a real good one. I just finished reading for the second time Witness to Roswell,
Ooh.
um, and it was just everybody they could find. There's like 600 basically witnesses
Mhm.
to this whole event, and he interviews a lot of them. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I'll tip my hat to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mr. Brown. Here at the end,
Oh,
where
excuse me.
would you oh, you're good. Where would you like to send my listeners to find out more online? If there's anybody you want to shout out, any websites that you can send them to?
Well, like I say, I don't have any online presence. I'm an old guy, and all this stuff just confuses the daylights out of me. My friend Patrick is just starting up his, but I don't even know a name yet.
Okay.
Patrick McMillan is his name, but I don't know how it's going to show up on line. But I can get you that information later when I know more about that.
Absolutely.
I would strongly suggest people look up M.K. Davis and Thinker Thunker um, as far as good quality videos um, where they're both just getting there and pick them apart, stabilize them, zoom in, do measurements, and those are really really good um, sources to just see a whole bunch of things and kind of see some of the thinking that smart people use.
All right.
Yeah, of course, go to the SIR website too, Sasquatch Investigation of the Rockies. Um, particularly look for the picture of the handprint. That's impressive.
That's up on that website
Yeah,
on
last time
Sir?
I looked, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out. All right, Jim. And to close us out, do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or a piece of advice?
Um, Sleep with the lights on.
That sounds familiar.
I can't think of anything right now. Believe it or not, I'm actually almost talked out. So
Okay. I did it. I
actually,
did it. Yes.
my mouth is actually starting to hurt. I was actually.
All right. All right. Well, we will let you go here. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining me today. This has been really fun, and I
Thank
appreciate you
you. I've
coming
had a
on.
great time. Yeah, and my friends, you'll get a thumbs up from my friends who actually managed to see me talked out. That doesn't
Awesome.
happen, so you'll get a thumbs up for that. Um, so yes, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
I would like to thank Jim sincerely for joining me on the show. Listeners, check out Sasquatch Investigations of the Rockies, Scott Barda's book, In the Dark Pine, and Patrick McMillan's Facebook group, Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, at the links below. And of course, if you haven't yet, take a peek at Jim's written piece, Let's Talk About Bigfoot, the link for which can also be found below. I also would like to take a second to thank Jason Cordova and the Society for Arcane Studies for recommending Jim to be my guest and for all of the excellent work they continue to do. The Paranorm Girl podcast can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Paranorm Girl Pod. Yes, I said Twitter, and I meant every word. Give us a follow, would you, if you're in the neighborhood? If you are catching this show on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share. I thank you. And don't forget, the second episode of my new collaborative cacophony of the supernaturally absurd, Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen, will be streaming live March 2nd at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Submit your strange light story to ghost.beer or give us a holler during the stream. That will be a wrap for us today. More to come next week. Whatever you may be doing and wherever you may wander, stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.